share this video because I know a lot of us are navigating uncertainty right now. And I'm personally in a transition season myself. So let me give you a little bit of context. This is my 4th time being laid off in my career. I say that factually, not emotionally, because it matters. When you've been through disruption more than one time, you stop reacting and you start responding differently. You learn what actually helps, what makes things worse, and how to move forward without panic. This is an event. This isn't some rah-rah motivational speech. It's a practical walkthrough of how I'm handling the layoff, calmly, strategically, and with intention. Because how you move in moments like this really matter. So let me give you guys kind of a little bit of context. So the role that I was recently in, it came to an end super unexpectedly. There's no drama around it. It was just a business decision at the end of the day. And those happen more often than people honestly want to talk about. And the one thing that I've learned after experiencing so many layoffs is they're rarely as personal as they feel in that moment. They're usually about timing, structure change, budget, priority shifting, not your capabilities. And I share that because it's so easy to internalize this layoff as something you did wrong, when in all reality, it's often just a reflection of the system that we were just operating inside. So this time around, I'm approaching things a lot differently than I was previously, with more clarity, more patience, and a lot less urgency. Because I've learned, panicking and just throwing anything out there, it doesn't always stick, and it doesn't always look the best, I guess, in the end. Because I know now what actually moves the needle more long term. Okay, so the first thing I focus on isn't what you actually think it is. So once I get the news of my layoff, I'm not running to update my resume or applying to everything that possibly comes to me in sight. It's about stability, personally, professionally, mentally. And I've learned when your nervous system is so dysregulated and everything just hits you all at once, everything feels urgent. And urgency creates bad decisions. And I'll tell you why. Because everything that comes at you, you think is important. You don't sit down. You don't slow down and actually look and figure out if this is going to be a good fit. If, this is the right thing for you. You just start saying yes to everything. You start over-explaining. You're desperate, and you start chasing opportunities that don't fit to you. Whereas if you just stop, slow down, process what happened, get a plan in place, and treat this as another project, and you do your checklist of how you're going to get this accomplished, it makes the process so much easier and takes off so much more stress. So before I do anything outward of, starting the process, I slow things down. I create structure in my day. I limit how much time I spend each day on job boards, applying for jobs and, DMing people. I make sure that I'm setting the pace. I'm not letting fear set the pace. Stability isn't about doing nothing. It's about creating enough calm so your next move is intentional instead of reactive. Every strong transition I've made started here with grounding first and action second. So I say all this to say, you have to slow down a little bit. And when you're slowing down, some things that I do while I'm in that process is I will sit down and I will kind of write out my emotions and my thoughts and, just kind of really understand the situation as a whole. And then once I understand, hey, this wasn't my fault. It wasn't anything I've done wrong. I wasn't fired. I was just laid off. It's just a business decision at the end of the day. I always keep everything cordial. I never sit here and blame anyone. Every time I've ever been laid off, it was always for a better opportunity. And you always have to think like that. So one thing that I will do is I will actually go through, and as I try to create the structure, a great resource that I like to use, and I use ChatGPT honestly for everything. And I know people are like, you'll either hate it or you'll love it. It's just the way that, you have to figure out what's best for you. And what I'll do is I will tell it what my objective is. I will then say, I want to spend this much amount of time each day. And then I start creating my ideal day with check boxes of things I'm going to be focusing on, what platforms I'm going to be posting on, what sites I'm going to be applying for jobs on, actually what type of jobs are going to be a good fit for me. So I'm not just applying for any and everything. I start laying out that structure and that plan and that vision. So you have to have that clarity before you're taking action. So let me tell you a little bit next about, what I do once I start feeling, grounded and I have a plan in place and I know where to put my focus and everything isn't important and urgent and, the world's on fire. Because at the end of the day, the world doesn't stop for you. And I know that's hard to, think about, because for you, everything just feels like it all revolves around you. But then it's just kind of like, well, you lose your job, bills are still going to keep coming, things need to be paid, kids need, resources and time and energy, and you can't let this slow yourself down. Don't get discouraged. You just gotta, and don't be afraid to reach out to people either. That's something that I've learned, because I used to keep this process very private and I wouldn't share it with anyone. And I would just rush in the background and then I'd be like, oh, I started a new job. Or I wouldn't even tell anybody. And now I've learned so much about the process and, just self-reflecting on what I do differently and what I've learned I have to do. It just makes this process so much easier now to navigate, because I have kind of like a workflow to go through. And I don't feel like everything's just up in the air. I have a process. I know what I want. I know what I need. And that's just what I stick with. I'm really trying to do this on a more personal level with you guys and really give you that inside scoop. So I do have like my notes here, so I kind of keep myself focused and, grounded, because I have a tendency to, ramble. So, once I'm grounded and I'm clear about my intention and my vision, I move into action. But I keep it super contained and I don't try to do everything at once, all in one day. I focus on a few channels that consistently lead to real opportunities for me. And I ignore all the rest, because there's so many job platforms nowadays. It can be so hard to want to do Instagram and, and DM this person and go on job boards and LinkedIn and ZipRecruiter and all these places. And it can be very distraction. It's going to be a huge distraction and just noisy, and you find yourself just endlessly scrolling. So from a job search perspective, I'm selective about where I look. I spend time on places now like LinkedIn. I see what roles were recently posted, what companies that I follow that match what I'm looking for, what the hiring individuals are at that company. I start building relationships with those individuals so that we can have a conversation. If there's ever a good fit, then I just say, hey, here's my resume if you ever think that this might be something you guys need. But building those connections with people and not being afraid to reach out is something that it took me so long to understand the importance of. So, going on those company pages and platforms that lean more towards operational and client-facing work rather than trying to do high-volume applications. So I usually stay away from roles that are like easy to apply. 600 people have applied. This job's been open for, 15, 16 days. I try to find jobs that have been open for a little bit longer compared to always just posted, because they are a little bit more selective on the candidates that come through. As someone that it was my job to do hiring for the previous role, so I know what they're looking for. I know what type of resume gets you to click on. I know what types of questions, the way you need to answer the questions that they have. So, just slowing down a little bit and being very intentional with your time will make this process go so much faster. So I also prioritize, again, conversations over applications. So that's where I'm reaching out, necessarily could be to people I've worked with in the past. Maybe operators or people that I really look up to and I respect, leaders in that specific space. So I'm looking for leaders in service-based businesses, because that's what my experience is. In my experience, referrals and quiet conversations lead me to better opportunities than mass applying has ever. All the jobs that I've done recently in the past 6 years have all been through word of mouth, referrals, and somebody else leading me to somebody else who then connect me with this person. So, and for me specifically, I have a background in client success, systems, client retention, anything that has to do with the client and building a process or a system, I'm usually involved in it. So on the consulting side, I like to keep things simple. I focus on visibility. So, sharing what I know, staying present, and I let people see how I think, because people will remember how you speak, your mannerisms, the way that you make them feel, the way that, you relay a specific thing. I don't push offers. I don't announce, oh my gosh, I can now take 6,000 clients. I don't do that anymore. Now it's just kind of, hey, I get very clear on what I want so that I can attract the right people to me. And I trust that the right conversations will surface when my positioning is clear about what I want, who I want to work for, what I'm looking for. And the biggest lesson here is that resources are helpful, but discernment matters more. I trust it's not about being everywhere all the time. It's about being in the right places consistently and showing up. I know, I've said a lot. One of the biggest shifts that I've had over these years is how I interpret moments like this. And I like to think of a layoff isn't an ending. It's not a verdict of your value, your intelligence, or your work ethic. It's so easy to attach the meaning to uncertainty and assume it's something that I did, it's something you did, it's something you didn't do. But in all reality, uncertainty usually says more about the system you were operating in than the person that was actually inside it. I've learned that staying calm, staying grounded, avoiding, and staying calm and, not going in 6,000 places at once, it doesn't mean that you're avoiding taking action. It means that you're choosing to move with intention instead of fear. And just because the next steps, they're not clear, it's not laid out, it doesn't mean that nothing is happening in the background that you can't see. A lot of progress and transitions like this, they happen quietly. And you'd be surprised when you wake up in the morning and you see a message from somebody and you're saying, oh my God, I haven't talked to this person in years. Oh my gosh, they just sent me something. They connected me with this person here. And, with that stuff happening quietly in the background, it's crazy to see it happen quietly before anything surfaces at all. You have no clue in the background what's going on, who saw your video. And I'll talk a little bit too what I've been doing differently too on social media as well. On social media, I've gotten, again, I figured out my plan. I got intentional. It's a lot easier to get your message across to thousands of people than depend on one person and say, hey, can you share this with your boss? Hey, can you share this with this person? And doing one-on-one individuals. What I do is because I also have a consulting firm, I will be very clear about who I'm looking for, what offers what I specialize in, not necessarily what offers I have, but usually a little bit about myself, what my background is, how I can help, who I help, who I serve. And then if that's something that you're looking for, I tell them to reach out to me. Plain and simple. I wanted to share all this because I know how isolating this transition, especially one like this, can feel. Especially when you're trying to stay composed, you're trying to keep everything together, but everything just feels so uncertain. And what I've learned over time is that you don't need to rush to the next chapter, as crazy as that sounds. I know the bills don't stop. I know everything still keeps going. But at the end of the day, you can do a payment plan. You can ask to have, a payment pushed out a little bit. And you don't need to rush to that next chapter. It doesn't prove anything. You need clarity. You need steadiness. And you need to trust your ability to navigate what's going to come next. This season, it's not about forcing outcomes or something to be a specific way at a specific time. Because at the end of the day, the universe works whatever way the universe is going to work. But it's about making thoughtful, intentional moves, staying present, and allowing the right opportunities to surface. If you're in a similar place, you're not behind, we're just in between. And that space, although it can feel so uncomfortable, it's often where the strongest transitions begin. And what I'll do is in the description, I will also try to put resources, maybe any quick guides, any places that I search for jobs, maybe any different prompts that I give to ChatGPT to help, any type of resources that can help you guys navigate this process with me. I'll put them in there for you. If this has been helpful or it resonates or, you just don't feel alone anymore, give this video some love, share it with somebody that might be going through a difficult time. Because at the end of the day, guys, we're not alone. We're all here to work together. And you're supported, you're cared about, and you're just taking it day by day. And sometimes that's all we have, that's all we can do. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next video.